Postmaster General Louis Dejoy has suspended controversial changes to the U.S. Postal Service in advance of the election. Critics said that the policies had been causing mail delays. Many worried that would potentially compromise mail-in voting this fall. In a recent article for Patch, Mark Konkol argues the sudden reversal is linked to widespread media coverage of the issue. He says reporting inspired pressure to save the Postal Service. And Mark joins me now from Chicago. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. Mark, great to have you on our show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Lana.
Well, so you say that some good old-fashioned journalism really helped to save the Postal Service from what you called, quote, a death spiral. Explain.
So what was happening locally in Chicago is that people weren't getting their mail, myself included, for weeks at a time. And it was a local story. Aldermen were having trouble getting congressmen to do anything about it. And President Trump was tweeting about his dislike for mail-in voting. Postmaster Dejoy was recently installed. He has no experience with the Postal Service, and it wasn't getting any traction until AP reporter Matt Daly got a memo from sources that showed exactly what Dejoy was doing. He cut overtime. He started to make mail carriers work in the late afternoon rather than early in the morning. Routes like my neighborhood in Chicago that were overtime routes weren't getting covered at all. At the post office in Roseland neighborhood near my house, people were going crazy in there, screaming at the clerks, "Where's my mail?" It was really upsetting. And after the AP broke the story about the memo, this became a national story about mail-in voting and whether or not there was a move by the Trump administration or Republicans or Dejoy or whoever to kill the Postal Service. The memo showed that Dejoy comparing the Postal Service to U.S. Steel on its downslide. And, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois made a good point. It's called the Postal Service, not the Postal Company. And that's the situation we're in right now.
With so many people, especially having an extra level of appreciation for those hardworking men and women in the Postal Service during the pandemic. Well, Mark, you also report that without media coverage, Postal Service leaders would have continued, in your words, lying to politicians as well as the general public. What were these lies and how were they uncovered?
Well, I did a poll on patch.com. Alderman O'Shea on the southwest side did a poll. People in neighborhoods were saying overwhelmingly that mail was not being delivered. The Postal Service, on the other hand, said customer satisfaction was 100%. And it was ridiculous. In fact, I did a follow-up story recently about a woman who went to the post office at 2 p.m. in the 60655 area code and found a sign on the door that says closed for lunch, the Postal Service, like it was a bait shop. And I sent a note to the Postal Service, and they got back to me and saying their investigation showed that the post office wasn't closed and the sign wasn't put there by anybody that worked at the post office. But the woman who went there told me, well, all the lights were off, the door was locked, and nobody was there. So you tell me if it's a lie or not. But this is the kind of tactics that are happening with the Postal Service under Dejoy because of these changes that he wants to make to make it the Postal Company instead of the Postal Service.
Wow, it is hard to imagine that as the response. Okay. Well, the Postmaster General is scheduled to testify before a Senate panel on Friday and a House committee next week. What do you hope to hear from him?
Well, I think that, unfortunately, this isn't about people not getting their medication and their unemployment checks and the bills that they need to pay. This is about the election in November and the controversy over that. This is a Democrat versus Republican issue, and he's going to have to answer for that. That's the reason that he rolled back the cuts to overtime and the time changes and plans to shorten hours at post offices and remove the blue pickup boxes from corners. That's the only reason we're talking about it. And I think that people in Chicago, in my neighborhood, we're happy for whatever reason if the mail gets delivered better. And I think that he's going to get grilled on, on partisan lines about what's going on with the post office. But make no mistake, this is about November. This is about Election Day. This is about mail-in voting. And that's what we're going to hear. That's what I expect to hear.
You know, Mark, it is so interesting that an organization that that has existed for so long, with appreciation from most Americans, is now being so politicized. And I spoke with a former director of the board chair, or sorry, a chairman of the board of directors of the U.S. Postal Service, who said that in his time there were Republicans and Democrats appointed in equal measure, and that they all really got along because there wasn't much to politicize when it came to the Postal Service. What more can you tell us about how it's come to be that we actually know Postmaster General Dejoy's name around the kitchen table, that everybody knows who he is now, and how this has become politicized?
Well, I mean, I think we know about it because of the AP story and those memos that Matt Daley obtained. That was, just regular old shoe leather reporting that, that people deserve. And I think that, the Postal Service is probably the only government agency, or it's the highest ranked government agency. It's the one thing about the federal government that almost everyone agrees that we could trust, except now during a pandemic with a historic election on the line. So I think that, the reason that we know who Louis Dejoy is because of the memo that he wrote and the context of his appointment. He's a big-time Republican fundraiser. He's a big fundraiser for President Trump. He's a corporate guy who wants to turn the post office into a company, a for-profit company, when, for the history of America, the Postal Service has been just that, a service to get messages across the country, since our founding.
As you said, shoe leather reporting, that's how it's done. Mark Konkol, thank you.
Thank you.